Tēnā koutou katoa and hello everybody. Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast. My name is Ben Adelberg and I'm coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland.
And g'day, I'm Emma Strutt and I'm currently coming to you from Gungaloo country in Queensland. And before we dive into our conversation today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community.
The Lentil Intervention is an Australasian educational and advocacy platform dedicated to raising awareness about the current climate and health crisis.
And on this podcast, we invite guests to chat about topics that will inspire you to take action to improve your own health and the health of the planet.
So please subscribe to and share this podcast and visit our website for the full show notes.
And don't forget to buy us a coffee if you'd like to support our work.
And we are back, a brand new year, a brand new season, number 3. We have taken a much needed extended break, but here we are. Some fresh ideas to build on for the year, but one thing continues unchanged. More brilliant guests to share important stories about our planet and health. And our first guest will certainly help us kick it off right.
That's right. So today we're joined by Ryan Andrews, who I'm very excited to talk to as we've got so much in common. Ryan is a dietitian based in the US with a very impressive resume. He's also a yoga teacher, a strength and conditioning specialist, and a sustainable food systems advocate. He's recently written a book on these very topics entitled Swole Planet, Building a Better Body and a Better Earth. So Ryan, a big g'day and kia ora. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Emma and Ben, I'm glad we are able to connect. Thanks.
An absolute pleasure. And as I've just mentioned, I think this could be the conversation that really sets the tone for 2022. It's something we don't like to dwell on, but 2 years so far of COVID lingering around. And it's really had us asking a lot of questions about what we eat, how we live, our health in general, and the health of the planet as well. But before we go down that big rabbit hole, let's start off with yourself, Ryan. Tell us a little bit about your background. As Emma's mentioned, very active. You've got a past bit of history in bodybuilding, but also quite diverse qualifications. So tell us a little bit about your journey and to how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like different chapters in my life. So I've been in the world of nutrition and health and fitness for many, many years. I was doing competitive bodybuilding in my teens. So I started that at age 14. And that was a unique introduction into the world of nutrition and wellness, if you want to call it wellness, competitive bodybuilding. It taught me a lot about physique transformation. And I really valued the lessons I learned in that. But it definitely had a very narrow framework in terms of how you thought about your own nutrition. It was all about how can I eat to maximize my physique development. And over the years, as I entered school, graduate school, and started working in the real world, and I started to widen my perspective, that really, I think, helped me start to consider these other things that matter in the food system. So early on, it was, okay, how can this meal benefit me and my physique? And then as the years went by, it was thinking about how can this meal better influence animals and farm workers and the planet. And it just continues to widen. And so now it really encompasses the entire food system. And it was nice because, like I said, it started off as a very much an individual endeavor with bodybuilding. But then in graduate school, I had the academic side of things, so learning about the science of nutrition and the human body and wellness. And then I was able to spend a lot of time on farms and with food recovery nonprofits, kind of learning about how food is actually grown out in the world. And so starting to connect all those dots, I think offered me a really nice overall perspective about our health and the food system.
Yeah, so I'm gonna quote directly from your book here about your journey from a 250-pound, 12-egg omelette-eating bodybuilder to a 160-pound, 12-legume-eating bike to the farmer's market and with reusable bags yogi. So it's quite a mouthful and quite a transformation. So yeah, like where do you even start with this?
Yeah, a dozen eggs each day. That was a thing. That was not exaggerating. I'd buy my food for the week, and whoever was checking me out at the grocery store, I thought I was buying food for a restaurant or something. Like, who are you buying 5 dozen eggs for? That's just me. So that's the other thing about bodybuilding, is that it's such a usually such an animal heavy way of eating, animal food heavy way of eating. So a lot of eggs and meat and fish, and that you don't have to do that for sure. At the time, that's how I was doing it, but that really changed over the years for sure for me.
It's that obsession of protein. That's where a lot of it would have come from, wouldn't it? I relate to that because my journey and interest in food started in school, but it was for performance related with my triathlon background. Same thing. What can I eat to maximize the energy, maximize the power for me to get better? And now when I look back at certain things I ate, probably did the opposite. But, and then as through my own journey, which we're not going to go into detail now, but it's a similar approach. You start appreciating the impact it has on other, or the bigger picture, really. And the environment was a big one for me. And then eventually, because being vegetarian, I thought that, vegetarian is fine. That's actually good for the food system. It's fine for the animals. We don't have to worry about, they're treated fine, which... Wow, have I learned since that? But same thing. It's that whole realization. But that protein, whey protein, it's important for the muscles, and animal protein is king. And without that, you're going to be weak. You're not going to have. It's all about the gains, and where you get that from. So yeah, there's definitely that association, isn't it?
Yeah, and in the U.S., I mean, we really, as a culture, as a country, we build meals around animal foods and animal protein. So I teach a class at a college, and I have the students experiment for a day and just eat more plant foods. And when they're reflecting on it, they talk about they don't know what to eat. When they're not eating animal foods, they think about, I guess I'll have more salad or some cut up fruit. So there's a very limited awareness about how to actually build meals that are full of nutrients, that taste good, that don't contain as many animal products. So there's definitely a deficiency of knowledge, at least in the U.S.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like, the salad is lettuce and tomato and cucumber, and that's it. And that's why you don't make friends with salad.
Yeah, that really is the extent of it in some cases, I know.
Yeah. But something I really appreciated in your book, so obviously you've just told us, like, your food choices now are very multifaceted. And what I really loved was when you attach a larger than self meaning to your goals, not only are you more likely to succeed in those goals, but you're more likely to benefit the world around you. And I think that's a really powerful motivator for lasting and meaningful change. So I appreciate you actually have that in your book there.
Oh, I'm so glad you noticed that. Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've done a lot of nutrition counseling with people, and common things that I would hear were that I just don't have the willpower, I don't have the motivation to eat healthy. And I suspect that sometimes that's because it's a very kind of self-focused endeavor, kind of like competitive bodybuilding, where it's all just about what you can do for yourself. And I think that's fine to a degree. But I think if we really want to tap into a deeper level of motivation, it's considering these bigger than self goals, the goals for the greater good. If we are making food choices with animals in mind, farm workers in mind, soil health in mind, water pollution in mind, that's a lot of incentive to change your eating and eat in a certain way. So it goes so much further beyond yourself. And I think, like you said, Emma, it's very powerful.
And it's really about, a lot comes down to what we know and what we don't know. And I think that's what's crucial, and this is why the three of us are here, is because we appreciate that, and it took us years to go through that self-realization journey, yet we're now here to try and accelerate that and say, hang on, don't wait, let us kind of show you right now and educate you. And I guess that leads us on to the book, Swole Planet. What was the driver for that book? What inspired you to put this fantastic book together?
I mean, other than observing really a steady decline in all ecological metrics that was pretty alarming to me, it really is rooted in my background. So spending so many years in the fitness and sports performance and weight management world, and then spending more years now helping out on farms and in the sustainability world, I really just wanted to bridge the gap between the two different worlds, because to me, there's not a lot of interaction between those worlds. So you have very serious athletes and people focused on performance with very little, if any, awareness about anything beyond their own pursuit of excellence. And then you have people, dedicating their lives to sustainability. And so I kind of wanted to find some sort of a sweet spot between those two worlds. Like, what kind of behaviors can we engage in that consider our wellness and strength and resiliency, but also consider the strength and resiliency of the planet. So just it wouldn't detract from one another. They would build on each other more than anything.
Now, I'm hoping our regular listeners will be all over this, considering we talk about it so often on the podcast. But for any new listeners that are out there joining us for season 3, could you just tell us, in a nutshell, basically just a bit of an overview of where we presently are in terms of climate change and ecological overshoot, and then why do our food choices even matter when it comes to these issues?
Yeah, so the news mostly isn't great. Currently, we're in an ecological overshoot. So right now, it takes about 1.7 Earths to support humanity's demand on nature, and that's a global average. So if you live in the U.S., if everybody lived like we live in the U.S., it would take about 5 Earths to support humanity's demand on nature. Obviously, that's unsustainable. And when you look at the food system and you just make your way across the board of different ecological metrics, the food system is a major driver. So greenhouse gas emissions, about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, depending on the exact estimate, are coming from the food system or attributed to the food system. About half of all habitable land is being used for food production. About 70% of freshwater withdrawals are going to the food system. About 78% of water pollution is attributed to the food system. We're squeezing out different species, and farm animals are spreading across and taking over different landscapes, so we're losing biodiversity. So it's a lot of scary things, and things that, and this kind of ties into why I wrote the book, I hope we can have policies and regulations from governments to make all of this stuff better and make it easier for people to do the right thing. But frankly, based on what I know, we're running out of time to wait for that. So I think whatever we can do to take action in our communities, as individual eaters, at our place of business and schools and things like that, I think definitely now is the time to do that.
So we don't want to give too many spoilers away, because we want people to download this book and read it. And Emma and I both having read this, it's a very worthwhile investment to make. But let's go into a little bit about the book itself, just to give some teasers and so on. So what do you explore in that book? Why this book above so many other books now that are finding their way on the market, whether it's environmental, whether it's health related, everything in between? There's a lot out there. What makes this book stand out?
I have a few different sections in this book. I hope I was able to take all the different bits of information and make it very practical. So I have a section about nutrition and some 5 major dietary adjustments we can make, and I'll mention those in just a second. I also have a section about physical activity and movement, and a couple of ideas about what we can do in that world to actually benefit the greater good and the planet. And then I also have a bigger picture lifestyle section about just some other things to think about with inequity and the history of the food system. Specific to the 5 major dietary adjustments, so to, I guess, offer a little bit of a teaser for the listeners, first one would be find your minimal effective dose of animal products. And I was very careful with how I wanted to word that first one. So my diet is a vegan leaning, sustainability seeking diet, but vegetarian and vegan are labels that can have a lot of baggage for people. So plus there's individual nutrient needs, and the food system is so complex globally speaking that when you get into saying things like eliminating animal products, I get a little bit less comfortable with that. So finding your minimal effective dose of animal products, I thought, allowed some wiggle room for people depending on their exact nutrient needs and part of the world. So that's the first major dietary adjustment. And the second one is minimizing wasted food. Wasted food is a major concern. About 1/3 of all food that we produce is lost or wasted. And this is a big deal because it wastes resources. And when you send food to landfills, it releases greenhouse gases. The third dietary adjustment is to support sustainable farms. Farmers are absolutely so important to the future of the planet. So they are soil managers and water managers, and what they do in terms of what kind of chemicals they apply to their soil and how they use irrigation water and how they raise animals, it's so important for so many different things on the planet. The fourth one would be eat a wider variety of minimally processed foods. And that's kind of a twofold in one recommendation. So the first is that we eat a lot of processed foods. In developed countries, more than half of our diet is built around highly processed foods, not great for our health and minimizing disease. And those foods often contain things like palm oil and sugar from sugar beets and sugar cane, and just different ingredients that can have an ecological burden. And the second part of that is the variety. We do a pretty dismal job with variety. Especially in the U.S., which is what I'm most familiar with. We really get the vast majority of our calories from just a handful of foods. And when you're that reliant on such a narrow group of foods, that's not supporting a very resilient and robust food system. And then the fifth and final dietary adjustment is minimize single-use plastics. I don't think I realized that plastics were a byproduct of natural gas or petroleum until my early 20s. I just knew that's where protein powder came in. I was like, my whey protein comes in a plastic jug. That's about all I knew. And plastics are so ubiquitous on planet Earth, it's really a threat to ecosystems. It's a threat to us. Microplastics are turning up everywhere in our ecosystem. And the way we produce plastics now and have such a limited way of handling them after we produce them. There's not really good ways to recycle. Burning is not a good way. Sending it to the landfill is not great. So we produce it and don't really have anything to do with it afterwards. So it's creating this pollution burden for everyone. So those are the 5 main dietary adjustments. And I go into more depth on those in the book.
Well, I'm definitely keen to touch a little bit on some of them because there's a lot we can relate to. Going back to your earlier comment about the impact that the food system has on our ecology, on the health of the planet. Your book does focus on American statistics, but our listeners will know how much we've banged on and on and on the tremendous impact it has here within New Zealand and Australia. So that should be nothing new. We've got plenty of episodes that cover that. Impact on water quality, sort of ecological footprint and biodiversity and deforestation and all that. But I really like starting with your first point, your tactful approach to minimizing the amount of animal products. I think Emma will agree, we're now in our third year. We've kind of taken a more tactful approach as well. I mean, we both will promote the ideal is a whole food plant-based diet for all the nutritional benefits and minimizing the impact on the planet. But if that's if that's the all or nothing approach, we're not going to get there. That's just not going to happen. So there's certainly a lot more impact, positive impact that can be made that some will go down that path, but if everyone else at least reduce their intake, even by 1 day a week, that can make a significant impact. And then if you go down to 1 day, 2, and then some will increase that. But I think it's about engaging. I think this is the most important part here. It's about engaging the broader audience than switching them off straight away by saying, oh, you have to go vegan, that's it, that's non-negotiable, because they're just going to turn and walk away, and you've achieved nothing. So I like, and you do this in that chapter, you take that more tactful approach. You show the benefits of going more down that spectrum, but you're giving a choice, and people want a choice. And I think that's going to achieve more from that.
Yeah, I sorry to interrupt, but I know in the U.S. a lot of people really only see two options, and the option is business as usual, which is a lot of animal products every day in their diet, or something like veganism or vegetarianism, and
which
those are kind of the two paths,
right? In some minds, yeah.
If that's unappealing, or they just are not at a point in their life where they can. They don't have the bandwidth or the money, or it's just not a good time to do that, then they go back to business as usual. So to remind them and encourage them that there is a lot of nuance between the two, a lot of gray area between the two, I think is really important. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Ben.
Yep. And also in this section, it might seem a little left of center for the listeners, but something I found really interesting was your love for perennials. Can you talk to us about that? Why do you love them so much?
Yeah, perennials are great. So I guess the main distinction for listeners, if they don't know, annuals and perennials. So annual crops would be something you plant every year. Perennials, once you plant a perennial, it comes back year after year, and you don't have to replant the seed each year. So because of that, it develops a robust root structure, and it tends to kind of naturally aerate the soil. So you don't have to do any tilling. The farmer doesn't have to do any tilling. The roots go out further so that the roots can reach different groundwater sources. You maybe don't have to add as much irrigation. And you get this bounty of whatever it's producing year after year, whether it's like a fruit tree, or I'm trying to think of other perennials, asparagus or artichokes, things like that. So yeah, perennials are wonderful because you hopefully limit the tilling necessary, the water inputs, the chemical inputs. So it's kind of a trifecta win.
Less labor intensive for sure, and less reliance on fossil fuels as well, which is a big component of our agriculture system, the Haber-Bosch process. So yeah, it's there's a lot to be said for that for sure. The other thing that I quite like as well is, or not quite like rather, let's rephrase that. The other thing that's super important about minimizing the amount of ultra-processed foods is that there's a direct link between that and other components that you talk about, because the majority of processed foods, if not all of them, comes in packaging. So if we're aiming to reduce packaging, that's already a direct link. And similarly, you've mentioned this, the impact that the food system has in producing a lot of these ultra-processed foods is, for instance, another very common, cheap ingredient in those is dairy, some form of dairy. And we know in New Zealand in particular how destructive that is, or has been and still is and continues to be on our land in general. So there's a lot of other components. We think, a processed food is not super healthy for me. But what people don't realize, and you do cover that, is the actually indirect impact it has on the environment. Where does the palm oil come from? Where's the dairy come from? Where do all these other plantations go to produce those cheap ingredients? So yeah, I think there's a lot of super important components that you cover in this, all interlinked, and certainly a lot of good lessons to be learned from that.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of us in more developed countries aren't working in agriculture, so the first time we see a food is usually at the grocery store, where it's in packaging and it's gone through a lot of processing in many cases, and so it's hard to really know all the different original raw ingredients that went into that food. Like you said, somebody might grab a box of something and think, it can't be that complicated, but it can have ingredients stretching from around the world from all types of different farms and have all types of different, like a cascade of negative repercussions on animals and the planet.
Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to trying to eat ethically, making those decisions on the daily can be hugely overwhelming, as you've just covered. There's so much to think about, from environmental impact to social justice issues to culturally appropriate food choices. Like it's a lot for the average consumer. But you've also got in the book some really handy tips for like meal planning strategies, just to minimize that decision fatigue. Very helpful. Did you want to, tease the carrot a little bit in terms of what you cover there?
Yeah, I can mention that. And yeah, Emma, you as a dietitian, in thinking about all these different things and helping people with food choices, there's so much that people are juggling when they're thinking about their food choices. So adding on something like you said, any of the things we're talking about today can be kind of burdensome for people. So however we can help ease the process, I think all for the best. In terms of meal planning, I've always been a big believer in finding some simple go-to or default meals. And I think pretty much everybody has default meals, whether they know it or not. They kind of have a rotation of things they eat week in and week out, month in and month out. Maybe it changes with the season, time of year. So if you can have some go-to meals that meet some of these criteria, I think you make it a lot easier for yourself, instead of kind of putting the pressure every day and saying, all right, today it's a fresh day. I have to find new ideas for today, new recipes, new meals. Like, what if you just had maybe 2 or 3 breakfasts that you like to rotate through, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 lunches you like to rotate through, 5 or 6 dinners you rotate through. So you kind of have this like cheat sheet of these go-to meals that you can utilize. And I obviously wouldn't stick to those forever and always, but you could change them with the season, or when you just get tired of them, or when you want to try a new recipe or something like that. But just having kind of this go-to list, so it doesn't require a lot of mental energy each time you sit down to eat.
I think the key word here is versatility. Emma and I were talking about this earlier on, but taking a recipe, less recipes to become familiar with, but you get better with them, and you learn how to substitute as well. And I think that's something that people forget, that an ingredient, baking, I get it. It'll be a complete flop if you didn't follow every single instruction to the T. But with cooking, versatility. There's something in there you don't like, take it out. There's something you really like and want to include it, put it in. There's something that's not in season, and now that's something that's becoming more of a reality, is food shortages, or let's not use that term actually, that's a bit of scaremongering, but perhaps supply of food, whether it's imported or whether the supply chain is struggling to restock shelves and so on. So, not being stuck on this recipe says this is exactly what I need to use. I can't find a couple of those ingredients, that means it's not going to happen. So, if you get familiar with a couple of recipes, learn to be flexible with them. And that's how you can, I think that's what you're leading on to, is learn to become comfortable, and then start adapting and creating your own, which might suit better for your family or for yourself and so on. So I think that's another key component there that's quite a valuable lesson.
Yeah, definitely. And experimentation. I mean, trying things out and seeing how it goes, and you'll have some good outcomes and some bad outcomes, and you learn from it. That's all right.
Yeah, all part of the process, all good fun.
Yeah.
Another thing I really love that you've incorporated is, not just the food and environment data, but you've also included a section on other important lifestyle medicine pillars. So things like movement, stress management. There's a whole bunch of really good resources in there, and this is obviously important for everyone, but especially for those that take an interest in climate change and food systems and all of that scientific data. That can be really bloody depressing and miserable at times. So in order for us to show up and be effective advocates, we've really got to look after ourselves. So it's not just about the diet.
Yeah, a couple of different things I mentioned in the book. When it comes to physical activity, physical activity has so many different benefits for us. And when you tie in the planetary acknowledgement as well, I always encourage people to have a day of volunteering in their as a workout day as part of their workout split, because the day of volunteering can kind of serve as an active recovery day. So you're moving in different ways. And if you do it maybe at a farm or a community garden or something like that, you're helping to produce a sustainable food. You're helping in your community. They probably need the help. You're also getting this active recovery and moving your body in different ways. You're getting outside. Maybe you're meeting new people. So it's like checking all the boxes for overall health, mental health, things like that. And I also talk about things like stress and yoga. And Emma, you might appreciate this, but yoga, I could have written an entire book on yoga in of itself, but I think yoga can be really useful for mental health. And if we aren't in a good spot with our mental health, it's tough to do anything else that we've talked about today. So whatever kind of practice can benefit your mental health, I think is a good one.
Well, you said it yourself in the book. It's a book that considers biceps and abs alongside greenhouse gas emissions and farm workers' welfare. And I love that because it's bringing it all together. Personal health, planetary health, that's what we're all about. And we say this a lot, there's no point of being the healthiest person on the planet if there's no planet left to stand on. And conversely, you can't do much for the planet if you're not in a state yourself to be able to physically get out there and, partake in some environmental stewardship and so on. And I think that's, and the volunteering aspect is important from a social aspect as well, because especially the last 2 years with all these lockdowns and everything else, I think we've become a lot more isolated, which has potentially affected more mental health as well for more people. And that component of volunteering means you're getting involved. You're getting involved in a social setting. There's a lot to be said for that. There really is.
Yeah, I'm glad you appreciated that. I actually came up with a short list. I was trying to find it. I wrote down the other day. Oh, yeah. So abs and animal welfare, biceps and biodiversity, gains and greenhouse gas emissions. I was having a slow day writing, so I was trying to just kind of write some things down and generate some ideas. So I was trying to come up with these catchy little start with the same letter type of thing.
No, we can't say it enough. I mean, there's a lot of little things that, Emma and I have picked up different things in this book, but that's the beauty of it. It's, you go in and each person hopefully can resonate with something in particular and find some real value in, wow, this chapter, this is great. I'm going to reread it and I'm going to make some notes and I'm going to go out there and implement it. And it's easy reading, this book. There's some good background. That's important. But it makes it really easy to undertake some important lifestyle changes with the book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've also got a really long list of further resources and websites, and you've got links to some of your own resources as well, which are very hands-on, which is brilliant, like really useful. So very helpful compendium at the end there, which will keep people quite busy after they finish reading your book. Do you have any definite favourites that you could recommend to anyone on that list?
Ooh, narrowing
put you on the
down
spot
to
now.
definite favorites. I mean, gosh, I've picked up so many different brilliant things from so many different brilliant organizations and people. It would be hard to identify, I think,
narrow
just one
down.
or two. I don't know if I can give you one. Sorry.
What's your favorite child? Come on.
Yeah, right.
And we should also mention you're donating some of the proceeds from this book to some pretty worthy causes. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so 10% of all proceeds from the sales of this ebook will be going towards nonprofit organizations that are doing things to end factory farming, promoting healthy school lunch programs, regenerative agriculture, kind of all the things that I see as being important in a sustainable food system moving forward.
Absolutely brilliant.
So what, just out of interest, because I'm always interested to hear what dietitians are eating, what's your day on a plate look like?
Ooh, full day.
Or favourite meal, if that's easier.
12 flaxseed eggs.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I do, kind of fall into the having a short rotation of different breakfasts and lunches and dinners to eat. So, and it changes a little bit with the season, or if I'm working with a farm and getting food from them. I'm a big fan of shakes or smoothies. I like to usually have one either for breakfast or after a workout. It's just, I feel a little bit, they're bad talking about smoothies because they're like, everybody talks about smoothies now. Everybody's like, oh, leave me alone, stop pushing smoothies. But they can be really useful. You can put a lot of nutritious stuff in a smoothie. It's not overly filling. So I really like to have a smoothie at some point during the day. And then for lunch, I try to do something from the legume world, like more of a traditional legume, like a lentil or black bean or pinto bean or something like that, and build around that with some sort of vegetable or grain or potato or something like that. And then dinner, I'll maybe have more of like a soy-based type thing like tofu or tempeh. And then this is very general. How boring for listeners. I like, being more specific, I love Indian cuisine. So like curries are wonderful. I do a lot with curry. Middle Eastern cuisine, so a lot of like falafel. Love that. Mexican food is great. So yeah, there's no shortage of different options that I like to rotate through.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be taking meat off my plate. There'll be no options. But when you do transition to plant-based and you start experimenting with all of these different foods and different veggies and herbs and spices and cuisines from around the world, like the options are endless. It's really an enjoyable process once you actually kind of understand what to do with these new foreign foods.
Yeah, the more I've been into the world of kind of eating more plant-based diet, my variety of foods has really gone up. I think in my bodybuilding days, I really only ate about like 6 different foods, and that was about it.
Chicken, rice, and broccoli?
Eggs, and that was about it. But yeah, so it's nice to get variety up, which, again, good thing for us and the planet.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I think, this is a good time to wrap it up, but this has been, like I said right at the start, this has been a great way to kick off the year. We don't believe in New Year's resolutions. We believe in lifestyle changes that are long-term. And this is really what it's about. 2022, every year becomes more and more critical for the state of our planet. And there's another IPCC report due out, which is probably not going to be just as sobering, if not even worse off than last year's report. We're not a healthy planet in terms of the Western nations. We've got high rates of obesity and non-communicable diseases and so on. It is time now for a change. It's time yesterday for a change. So your book really brings it all together. We need to look after the planet. How can we do that? We can start off by looking at what we're eating on our plate. That has a big direct impact. By looking at what we're eating, we're also directly impacting our own personal health, our energy, our ability to get out there and undertake action. Your book does this brilliantly. We've read it. We're going to put this on our recommended reading list. It's something that we really want to encourage a lot of our listeners to download. Thank you so much for sharing this very important message, and thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Really grateful for all the work you do. Thanks for having me on, Ben and Emma.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.